The Valorian command station floated in the empty space between stars. It was a huge structure made of dark crystal, with tall spires that reached out into the void like fingers. For 300 years, the Valorians had watched this part of the galaxy. They had seen many species take their first steps into space. They had watched civilizations rise and fall. They considered themselves the keepers of order in this region, and they took that job very seriously. Commander Thullo stood in the center of the main observation room, his pale blue skin glowing softly in the dim light. The Valorians were tall beings with large black eyes and thin bodies that seemed almost fragile. But their minds were sharp, and their technology was advanced beyond anything most species could imagine. Talos had served on this station for 40 years, and in all that time, he had never seen anything that truly surprised him. That was about to change. A soft chime echoed through the room, and one of the junior officers, a young Valorian named Seth, looked up from his console with confusion on his face. His membrane, the thin layer of skin that covered his skull, was flickering with colors that showed his uncertainty. "Commander," Seth said, his voice careful and measured, "we are receiving a signal from Sector 7 Gamma. It does not match any known species in our database." Talos moved closer to the console, his long fingers tapping on the smooth surface to bring up the data. "Show me." The signal appeared on the screen, a series of waves and patterns that the computer was trying to decode. Talos watched as the translation matrix worked through the transmission, breaking it down into something they could understand. When the words finally appeared, he felt his membrane go cold. "This is the Earth vessel Resolute to any receiving station. We are conducting a survey of this sector. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." Seth looked at his commander with wide eyes. "Earth vessel? But Commander, the humans are extinct. Everyone knows this. Their planet was destroyed 80 years ago in a nuclear war. Their colonies died within a decade after that. There are no humans left." Talos said nothing for a long moment. He stared at the words on the screen, reading them again and again. The language was old, a dialect that had not been spoken in the galactic community for generations. But it was unmistakably human. "Scan the source of this transmission," Talos ordered. "I want to know exactly what is out there." Seth's fingers moved quickly over the console, directing the station's powerful sensors towards Sector 7 Gamma. The data began to flow in, and with each passing second, Thullo felt his unease grow stronger. The ship that appeared on their screens was massive. It was easily 3 times the size of a Valorian dreadnought, which were the largest warships in the collective's fleet. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, and covered with strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move as the sensors tried to focus on them. The patterns were absorbing their scanning beams, making it impossible to get a clear reading of what was inside. "I cannot penetrate their hull," Seth reported, his voice now carrying a note of fear. "Our sensors are being blocked." "But Commander, the weapon signatures alone." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Talos understood. The weapons on that ship were unlike anything in the collective's records. Energy readings that suggested weapons capable of destroying moons. Shield generators that seemed to create barriers of pure force around the vessel. And the engines, whatever technology powered those engines, was completely unknown to Valorian science. "One ship," Talos whispered to himself. "They sent one ship." He stood there for a long time, thinking about what this meant. The humans had been a young species when they destroyed themselves. They had only just begun to explore beyond their own solar system. They had been considered primitive by galactic standards, a species that would never amount to anything significant. And then they had proven everyone right by wiping themselves out in a war that had turned their beautiful blue planet into a radioactive wasteland, or so everyone had believed. Talos thought about the colonies that had, existed on Mars and Europa after Earth died. The collective had sent observers to watch them, expecting to document the final days of a failed species. The reports had said that the colonies were struggling, that their supplies were running out, that their people were dying. And then, one day, the observers had reported that the colonies had gone dark. No more signals. No more signs of life. The humans, it seemed, had finally finished the job they started on Earth. But now, 80 years later, a human warship had appeared in Valorian space. Not a desperate refugee vessel. Not a broken remnant of a dead civilization. A warship, armed with weapons that made the collective's most powerful dreadnoughts look like toys. "Send a response," Thalos finally said. "Standard greeting protocol. Tell them we are the Valorian collective and that we welcome peaceful contact." Seth hesitated. "Should we not alert the High Council first, Commander?" "Do both," Thalos replied. "Send the greeting and then contact the Council immediately. Tell them." He paused, searching for the right words. "Tell them that the dead have returned, and they have brought weapons." The message was sent, and then they waited. The human vessel did not move from its position. It simply hung there in the void, a dark shape against the stars, waiting for a response. Thalos found himself wondering what the humans had been doing for the past 80 years. Where had they hidden? How had they survived? And most importantly, why had they chosen this moment to reveal themselves? He thought about the old stories his teachers had told him when he was young. Stories about species that had been underestimated, that had been dismissed as weak or primitive, only to rise up and change the galaxy forever. He had always thought those stories were just lessons, meant to teach young Valorians not to judge others too quickly. Now he wondered if he was living through the beginning of a new story. A story about a species that had looked into the fire of their own destruction and had somehow walked out the other side stronger than before. The console chimed again. A response was coming from the human vessel. Thalos took a deep breath and prepared himself for whatever came next. He had a feeling that nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. Captain Daniel Price stood on the bridge of the Resolute with his hands clasped behind his back. He was a man in his mid-50s, with short gray hair and deep lines on his face that told the story of a hard life. His eyes were calm and steady, the eyes of someone who had seen terrible things and had learned to carry them without breaking. He wore a simple dark blue uniform with no decorations except for a small silver pin on his collar that showed the symbol of the United Earth Coalition. The bridge around him was a masterpiece of human engineering. Smooth curved surfaces, soft blue lighting, and dozens of screens showing data from every part of the ship. The crew worked at their stations in quiet efficiency, each one trained to perfection for this moment. This was the moment they had been preparing for their entire lives. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Dawson from the communication station. She was a young woman with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. "We are receiving a response from the alien station. They identify themselves as the Valorian Collective and say they welcome peaceful contact." Price nodded slowly. "Good. That is a good start." Commander Nathan Cole stepped up beside the captain. He was a large man with broad shoulders and a face that always seemed slightly suspicious of everything around him. He had been Price's first officer for 15 years, and there was no one the captain trusted more. "They are scanning us," Cole said, looking at the tactical display. "Their sensors are trying to penetrate our hull. They are not having much success." "Let them look," Price replied. "We have nothing to hide. And the more they see, the more they will understand." Cole raised an eyebrow. "Understand what exactly?" Price turned to look at his old friend. "That we are not the same species they remember. That the humans who nearly destroyed themselves 80 years ago are gone. We are something new now." The captain walked to the center of the bridge and looked at the main screen. The Valorian station hung in the distance, its crystal spires catching the light of distant stars. It was beautiful in its way, a monument to an ancient and powerful civilization. But Price felt no fear as he looked at it. The days when humanity feared the unknown were over. He thought about the journey that had brought them here. The long years underground, hidden beneath the ice of Europa and in the deep caves of Mars. The desperate struggle to survive, when it seemed like the universe itself wanted humanity to die. The endless work to rebuild, to learn, to grow stronger. His father had been one of the survivors of Earth, a young soldier who had made it to the evacuation ships just hours before the final bombs fell. He had spent his entire life telling stories about the old world, about the blue skies and green forests that would never exist again. And he had made his son promise to never forget what they had lost. Daniel Price had kept that promise. But he had also learned a more important lesson from the ruins of human civilization. He had learned that remembering the past was not enough. You had to build something better. Lieutenant Dawson, Price said, turning back to the communication station. Open a channel to the Valorian station. It is time to introduce ourselves properly. Amy nodded and her fingers moved across the console. Channel open, Captain. Price took a breath and began to speak. His voice was calm and clear, carrying across the void of space to the alien beings who were listening. This is Captain Daniel Price of the Earth vessel Resolute. We represent the United Earth Coalition, a government formed by the surviving human colonies of Mars, Europa, and Titan, as well as the restored territories of Earth itself. We have been watching your transmissions for some time and have identified you as the Valorian Collective. We come in peace and with hope for friendship between our peoples. He paused for a moment, then continued. We understand that the galactic community believe humanity to be extinct. We apologize for any confusion this may cause. The reports of our death were not entirely accurate. Cole made a small sound that might have been a laugh. That is one way to put it. Price ignored him and kept speaking. We have spent the past 80 years rebuilding our civilization. We have developed new technologies and new ways of living together. We have learned from the mistakes that nearly destroyed us. And now we feel ready to take our place among the stars, not as conquerors or beggars, but as equals. He straightened his shoulders. The Resolute is fully armed and prepared to defend itself if necessary. But we did not come here to fight. We came to talk, to learn, and to begin building bridges between our peoples. We hope the Valorian Collective will receive us in the same spirit. He nodded to Amy, and she closed the channel. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Dr. Lisa Grant, the ship's chief scientist, walked up from her station at the back of the bridge. She was a small woman with gray-streaked hair and glasses that she was always pushing up her nose. She had spent 40 years studying alien civilizations from a distance, using intercepted transmissions and long-range scans. Now she was about to meet one face-to-face. Captain, she said quietly, do you think they will believe us? About wanting peace, I mean. Price looked at her with tired eyes. I do not know, Doctor. The Valorians are an old species. They have seen many civilizations rise and fall. They may think we are just another young race that will burn itself out eventually. He turned back to the main screen. Our job is to show them that we are different, that humanity has changed, and if they do not believe us? Lisa asked. The captain was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke softly, so only she and Cole could hear. Then they will learn the other lesson we have taught ourselves over the past 80 years. That humanity will never allow itself to be destroyed again. By anyone. The console chimed. A new message was coming from the Valorian station. They want to meet, Amy reported, her voice carrying a note of excitement. The Valorian High Council is requesting a diplomatic meeting aboard our vessel. Price allowed himself a small smile. Tell them we would be honored to receive them. And make sure the conference room is ready. He looked at Cole. It seems we are about to make history, old friend. Cole nodded, his suspicious expression finally softening into something like hope. Let us try not to mess it up. The Valorian High Council met in a chamber deep within their greatest space station. The room was circular, with walls made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. 12 counselors sat in a perfect ring around a central projection area. Their tall forms still and silent as they processed the information that Commander Thalos had brought them. High Counselor Veth sat at the head of the ring, her position marked by a slightly elevated seat. She was ancient, even by Valorian standards, her pale skin almost transparent with age, her eyes carrying the weight of centuries of experience. She had seen empires rise and fall across the galaxy. She had witnessed wars that had burned entire star systems. She had thought nothing could truly surprise her anymore. She had been wrong. The image of the human warship floated in the center of the chamber, rotating slowly so that all the counselors could study it. The geometric patterns on its hull seemed to move and shift even in the projection, as if the ship itself was alive. Tell me again, Beth said, her voice echoing through the chamber. Tell me how this is possible. Our observers confirmed the destruction of Earth. We watched their colonies die. How can there be humans left to build such a vessel? Thalos stood before the council, his membrane flickering with nervous colors. He had never addressed the full council before, and the weight of their attention was almost too much to bear. But he forced himself to speak clearly. High Counselor, our observers were deceived. The humans did not die. They retreated underground, beneath the ice of Europa, into the deep caves of Mars, into hidden facilities that our probes could not detect. They went dark deliberately, making us believe they were gone. Counselor Dreth, a younger member of the council known for his skepticism, made a sound of disbelief. For 80 years? No species could hide for so long under such conditions. The resources required, the coordination needed, it would be impossible. Not impossible, Thalos replied. Merely very difficult. And the humans, it seems, are very determined when they want to survive. He changed the projection, showing data streams and analysis reports. We have been studying their transmissions since the Resolute appeared. Their language has evolved significantly from what our records show. Their technology is completely different from anything they possessed before their supposed extinction. They have not simply survived, counselors. They have transformed. Veth leaned forward, her ancient eyes studying the data. Explain their technology. What do we know? Thalos took a deep breath. Very little, High Counselor. Their hull material absorbs our scanning beams. We cannot see inside their vessel. But from the energy signatures we can detect, their weapons are far beyond our own. We believe they have developed some form of directed energy weapon capable of destroying planetary bodies. Their shields operate on principles we do not understand. And their engines. He paused, struggling to find words. Their engines seem to fold space itself. They can travel faster than any ship we have ever recorded. The chamber fell into complete silence. The counselors exchanged looks of concern and fear. Such technology was beyond anything the Valorian collective possessed. Beyond anything any species in the known galaxy possessed. One ship, Counselor Mira said softly. She was the oldest member of the council besides Voth, her voice carrying the wisdom of countless years. They sent one ship to announce their return. Yes, Thalos confirmed. And the human captain has implied that this vessel is not alone. He spoke of other ships, hidden in places we will never find. Dreth stood up, his membrane flashing with anger. This is a threat. They are threatening us. We should destroy this vessel before they can bring more of their fleet. And how would you propose we do that? Veth asked, her voice cold. You heard the report. Their weapons and shields are beyond our technology. If we attack them and fail, we will have made enemies of a species that could potentially destroy us. Dreth sat back down, his anger fading into uncertainty. Veth turned back to Thelos. You have spoken with them. What do you believe their intentions are? Thelos considered the question carefully before answering. I believe they are telling the truth about wanting peace, High Counselor. But I also believe they are fully prepared for war if peace fails. They have spent 80 years preparing for this moment. They would not reveal themselves unless they were confident they could handle any response we might give. A species that prepares for war while speaking of peace, Myra observed. That is not contradictory. That is wisdom. They learned from their own destruction. Veth nodded slowly. Yes, they looked into the fire that nearly consumed them, and they emerged stronger. She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. The question is whether we should fear this or welcome it. How can we welcome a species that could destroy us? Dreth demanded. Because they chose not to, Veth replied. Consider this, Counselor. They have been watching us. They have been studying our transmissions, learning about our civilization. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done so without warning. Instead, they sent a single ship to talk. She stood up from her seat, a rare gesture that showed the weight of the moment. The humans have given us a choice. We can be their friends, or we can be their enemies. I do not know about you, counselors, but I have no desire to discover what happens when we choose the wrong option. She looked around the chamber at each counselor in turn. We will accept their invitation to meet. We will go aboard their vessel and speak with their captain. And we will listen to what they have to say. Her voice hardened. But we will also remember what we have learned today. Humanity is no longer a young species taking its first steps into the stars. There's something new, something powerful, and something that will change the galaxy forever. She turned to Thelos. Prepare a diplomatic shuttle. I will lead the delegation myself. Thelos bowed. As you wish, High Counselor. As he left the chamber, he could not help but feel that history was being written in these moments. The humans had returned from the dead, and nothing would ever be the same again. The shuttle bay of the Resolute was enormous. It stretched nearly half a kilometer from end to end, with ceilings so high that the Valorian diplomatic craft looked like a small toy as it descended through the atmospheric barrier. The bay was spotlessly clean, its metal floors polished to a mirror shine. Its walls lined with equipment and machinery that hummed with quiet power. High Counselor Veth stepped off the shuttle and onto human ground for the first time in galactic history. She moved slowly, taking in every detail of her surroundings. Behind her came 4 Valorian guards, their ceremonial weapons held carefully at their sides. They had insisted on coming, though Veth knew the weapons would be useless if the humans decided to attack. A small group of humans waited at the bottom of the shuttle ramp. At the front stood a man in a dark blue uniform, his posture straight and confident, his gray eyes watching the Valorians approach with calm interest. Beside him stood a large man with suspicious eyes, a young woman with alert features, and an older woman with glasses who was studying the Valorians with obvious scientific curiosity. "I, Counselor Veth," the man in front said, bowing his head slightly in greeting. "I am Captain Daniel Price of the Resolute. Welcome aboard our vessel. We are honored by your presence." Veth studied the human captain for a long moment. He was shorter than she expected, reaching only to her shoulder. His body was thick and solid where hers was thin and delicate. But there was something in his eyes that she recognized. A hardness that came from surviving great suffering. A determination that could not be broken. "Captain Price," she replied, her voice carrying across the shuttle bay. "Thank you for receiving us. I confess that when I woke this morning, I did not expect to be meeting with a species that my people believed to be extinct. Price allowed himself a small smile. Life is full of surprises, High Counselor. Please, if you will follow me, we have prepared a conference room where we can speak more comfortably. He led them through the corridors of the Resolute, and Veth found herself studying everything they passed. The walls were smooth and clean, made of a dark material that seemed to absorb light. The crew members they encountered moved aside respectfully, but she noticed that none of them seemed afraid of the alien visitors. They were curious, yes, but not afraid. That told her more about humanity than any words could. The conference room was large and simply furnished, with a long table in the center and chairs arranged on either side. The humans took their seats on one side, the Valorians on the other. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Veth broke the silence. Captain Price, I will be direct with you. Your appearance has caused great concern among my people. A species we believe dead has returned with weapons that far surpass anything we possess. Many on my council believe you are a threat that should be eliminated. Price nodded, showing no surprise at her words. I understand your concern, High Counselor. If the situation were reversed, I would feel the same way. He leaned forward slightly. But I would ask you to consider something. We have been watching your civilization for years. We know the location of your homeworld, your major colonies, your fleet positions. If we wanted to destroy you, we could have done so without ever showing ourselves. His eyes met hers, steady and unblinking. We did not come here to make war. We came here because humanity is ready to rejoin the galactic community. We want to trade with you, to learn from you, to share what we have learned. We want to be part of something larger than ourselves. And the weapons? Veth asked. Why build such terrible weapons if you seek peace? Price was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. High Counselor, 80 years ago, my species nearly wiped itself out. We burned our own world with nuclear fire. Billions of people died because we could not find a way to live together without violence. He paused. The survivors swore that would never happen again. Not because of our own foolishness, and not because of anyone else. He gestured to the walls around them. These weapons are not threats. They are promises. A promise that humanity will never again be vulnerable to destruction. A promise that we will protect ourselves and our allies against any danger. And yes, a warning to anyone who might think of attacking us. The young woman beside him, Lieutenant Dawson, spoke up. Captain, if I may? Price nodded, and she continued. High Counselor, I was born on Europa, in a city carved out of ice 100 kilometers beneath the surface. My parents and grandparents lived their entire lives without ever seeing the sun. They survived because they believed that someday humanity would return to the stars. That someday we would take our place among the other species of the galaxy. Her voice carried a note of passion. We did not build these weapons because we want to fight. We built them because we want to live. And we want to live alongside species like yours, not in conflict with them. Veth listened carefully, her ancient mind processing every word. She looked at the humans sitting across from her. These strange beings who had crawled out of the ashes of their own destruction and transformed themselves into something new. You speak of promises and protection, she said slowly. But how can we trust you? How can we know that your weapons will not one day be turned against us? Price met her gaze without hesitation. You cannot know for certain, High Counselor. Just as we cannot know for certain that you will not try to destroy us the moment we show weakness. Trust must be built over time, through actions, not just words. He stood up and walked to a window that looked out into the stars. But I will tell you what I believe. I believe that the galaxy is vast and full of dangers that neither of us can face alone. I believe that cooperation is stronger than conflict. And I believe that humanity and the Valorian collective can accomplish far more together than we ever could apart. He turned back to face her. "Give us a chance, High Counselor. Let us prove that we mean what we say. And if we ever break that trust, then you will have every right to consider us enemies." The room fell silent as Veth considered his words. The other counselors watched her, waiting for her decision. The humans waited too, their faces showing hope and tension in equal measure. Finally, Veth spoke. "Very well, Captain Price. I will recommend to my council that we begin formal negotiations for a treaty between our peoples. I cannot promise that everyone will agree, but I can promise that I will speak in your favor." Price bowed his head. "That is all we can ask, High Counselor. Thank you." As the meeting continued into the details of diplomacy and agreements, both sides knew that something important had begun. A door had been opened that could never be closed again. And through that door, humanity was finally coming home. 6 months had passed since the meeting on the Resolute. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in centuries. News of humanity's return had spread across every corner of known space, carried by traders and diplomats and simple travelers who could not believe what they had heard. The species that everyone had written off as a failed experiment in evolution had risen from the dead, stronger and more advanced than anyone could have imagined. The treaty signing ceremony took place on the Great Assembly Station, a massive structure that floated at the heart of civilized space. Representatives from over 100 species had gathered to witness the moment when humanity officially joined the Galactic Assembly. Some came out of curiosity, wanting to see these strange beings for themselves. Others came out of fear, hoping to learn more about the weapons that humans possessed. And a few came out of genuine hope, believing that this new species might bring something valuable to the galactic community. Captain Daniel Price stood at the center of the Great Hall, wearing his dress uniform for the first time in years. Beside him stood the other members of the human delegation, representatives from Mars, Europa, Titan, and the restored territories of Earth. They were a diverse group, different ages and backgrounds and beliefs, but united by a common purpose. High Counselor Veth approached from the other side of the hall, followed by the other members of the Valorian delegation. She moved slowly, her ancient body showing signs of the fatigue from the long journey, but her eyes were bright and alert, carrying a warmth that had not been there 6 months ago. The two leaders met in the center of the hall, facing each other as representatives of their peoples. "Captain Price," Veth said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. "On behalf of the Valorian Collective and the Galactic Assembly, I welcome humanity to our community of worlds. May this treaty mark the beginning of a friendship that will last for generations to come." Price bowed his head. "High Counselor Veth, on behalf of the United Earth Coalition and all the people of humanity, I accept this welcome with gratitude and hope. We have traveled a long and difficult road to reach this moment. We are honored to finally take our place among the stars." He took the ceremonial pen that was offered to him and signed the treaty document. Then Veth did the same, her long fingers moving carefully across the paper. When it was done, the chamber erupted in applause, a sound that seemed to shake the very walls of the station. Later that evening, after the ceremonies were complete and the delegates had scattered to their own celebrations, Price found himself standing alone on an observation deck overlooking the stars. The lights of the assembly station glittered behind him, but he was looking outward, into the vast darkness of space. Commander Nathan Cole found him there, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey from the bottle they had been saving for this occasion. He handed one to the captain and stood beside him in comfortable silence. "Quite a journey," Cole said finally. "From hiding in caves to signing treaties with aliens. Our grandparents would not believe it." Price took a sip of his drink, feeling the familiar burn in his throat. They would believe it. They were the ones who made it possible. Every generation since the war has been working toward this moment. We just happen to be the ones who got to see it through. Cole nodded slowly. Do you think it will last? The peace, I mean. There are still plenty of species out there who do not trust us. And some of our own people are not happy about joining the assembly. Price considered the question carefully before answering. I do not know if it will last forever. Nothing does. But I believe we have given humanity the best chance possible. He gestured to the stars outside the window. Look at that. Billions of stars, each one with its own worlds and mysteries. There is enough out there for everyone, if we can learn to share it. He turned to face his old friend. That is what I want for humanity, Nathan. Not conquest or domination. Just a chance to explore, to discover, to grow. A chance to become something better than what we were before. Cole smiled, a rare expression on his usually serious face. You sound like one of those old philosophers from Earth. Maybe I do, Price admitted. But someone has to think about these things. Otherwise, what is the point of surviving? They stood there for a while longer, watching the stars and thinking about all that had happened and all that was still to come. Behind them, the sounds of celebration continued, human and alien voices mixing together in laughter and song. Eventually, Dr. Lisa Grant joined them on the observation deck. She had been talking with Valorian scientists all evening, exchanging information about their respective technologies and histories. Her face was flushed with excitement, the look of someone who had just had the best day of their professional life. Captain, she said, slightly out of breath. The Valorians have invited us to send a research team to their homeworld. They want to share their scientific archives with us. Can you imagine what we might learn? Price smiled at her enthusiasm. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity, Doctor. Make sure you put together the best team we have. Lisa nodded eagerly and hurried off to find her colleagues. Cole watched her go with amusement. She's going to drive the Valorians crazy with all her questions. Probably, Price agreed. But that is how knowledge is gained. By asking questions that others are afraid to ask. He finished his drink and set the glass down on a nearby table. The celebration was winding down now, the delegates slowly making their way back to their ships and stations. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Treaties would need to be implemented. Trade routes would need to be established. 1,000 details would need to be worked out before humanity could truly become part of the galactic community. But tonight, for just a few hours, Daniel Price allowed himself to feel something he had not felt in a very long time. Hope, not the desperate hope of survivors, clinging to life in frozen caves, but the quiet, confident hope of a people who had found their place in the universe. The Resolute was still out there, orbiting the assembly station along with ships from a dozen other species. Its weapons were dormant but ready, its crew alert but at ease. It was a symbol of everything humanity had become, a reminder that the species that had nearly destroyed itself had instead chosen to rebuild. And now, finally, they were home. Price took one last look at the stars, said a silent thank you to all those who had sacrificed to make this moment possible, and then turned to rejoin the celebration. There was still work to be done, still challenges to face, still a future to build on, but for the first time in 80 years, humanity was not building that future alone.